Why didn't they cancel school?
Could you hear him, Adam?
I didn't.
Why didn't they cancel school? You know, here when we get that much snow, school is closed.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know actually. I believe one school in my town was closed, but I think that usually the mayor of the town has to call the principals and tell them to cancel school, and the mayor didn't call, so we went to school anyway. But yeah, usually sometimes they do cancel school, but they don't like to cancel school in Moldova because if you have a snow day, you know, you make up that day, you do that day again at the end of the school year in the summer. But here, they don't do that. If we don't have school on Monday, we have to come to school on Saturday. So they don't like to cancel school.
Yeah, I would.
So what would you guys think about that if we had a snow day? Let's say we had a snow day today. Instead of coming to school today, you'd have to come to school tomorrow.
Yeah.
Cameron, is that your hand I see up? All right, guys. Cameron, is that your hand? Go ahead, Cameron.
Is there any prejudice by you?
Is there any prejudice by me?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually there is. In Moldova, there can be some prejudice. There are sometimes because there are people who speak Romanian and there are people who speak Russian. Sometimes they are prejudiced against each other. That Romanian speakers won't like Russian speakers speakers won't like Romanian speakers. There's also a big problem. There's a group that live here. They're called the Roma, the Romani actually. And does anyone know the word gypsy?
Yeah. Gypsy.
What is a gypsy? Those of you that know it, what is a gypsy?
Oh,
Isaac?
isn't it like one of those people that go?
No, that's an Egyptian, Isaac.
That's an Egyptian. But that's actually where the word comes from.
Cameron or Emma Pearson, do you know what a gypsy is? Sorry, Adam.
Yeah.
They travel around. Okay, Adam, you want to fill in a little bit for her?
Yeah, they're a group of people that originally came from India. They traveled all the way from India a very long time ago to Europe. And they still live in Europe. And they look a little bit different than most European people. And sometimes there is prejudice against these Romani. And sometimes people use the word gypsy. And it's not a very polite word to use. But there's a lot of prejudice against them. And here in Moldova, people don't like to give them jobs. People say that they're criminals and thieves, and it's not true.
So it's because they look different?
And there's a sort of a history of prejudice against the Romani. Because, I mean, part of it is because they look different. But it's kind of like in the United States, sometimes there are people who think that if someone looks a certain way, they must, be a certain kind of person. And that's not always true.
Yeah,
the same thing is here.
We've been learning a lot about prejudice, and particularly in the time of the civil rights movement, toward black people and how they were treated. So it's interesting, I think, for me, and I don't know for you boys and girls, to hear that there is prejudice in Moldova, not because people look different, but because they speak a different language. I'm assuming that the people who speak Russian and the people who speak Romanian probably look similar. Right? Like you couldn't look at them and say, I know that that person speaks Russian or I know that that person speaks Romanian. Because they look similar, but the prejudice is just because they speak a different language.
Yeah, I've actually had people be impolite to me because I don't speak Romanian. I don't speak the national language. I only speak Russian. And so they ask me, why don't you speak the national language? That's wrong. You speak Romanian. And I try to explain to them, I'm sorry, but I don't know how to speak Romanian. And I'm very...
Okay, Emma Pearson? How do you spell Romani?
R-O-M-A-N-I.
Spell it again?
R-O-M-A-N-I. Parker?
Well, that doesn't really make any sense, because if you look similar, then how do they know if they speak a different language?
Could you hear
Because
him?
they hear them.
If they look similar, how do they know they speak a different language? How does that prejudice come about?
Because they
Well,
have
I mean,
It's not
listening.
like
If-
that.
Let him answer, guys.
If, for example, I am a policeman and I want to know who committed a crime, and I have to speak to the people. Yeah? It's very similar. It's, I see someone, I can see they're different, but if I speak to someone, I can hear that they're different too. So usually it comes from them speaking to one another
Okay.
that they find this out.
Dale?
How would you talk if you don't speak that language?
How do you talk to the people who speak Romanian when you don't speak Romanian?
Well, a lot of people here speak both languages. Many people speak Russian and Romanian. And sometimes it happens that they don't speak any Russian, and I try to explain to them what I mean in Romanian. I know a couple of words in Romanian, not very many. And I know how to say a few things, and I try to use that. But if that doesn't work, usually there'll be someone around who speaks both languages, and we can ask someone to translate for us.
So most of the time you're speaking in Russian there as opposed to English.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, when I'm working, when I'm teaching, I try to speak only in English to help my students. But outside of school, most people don't speak English here, so I have to speak Russian.
Nora? You forgot Tyler Spinella?
What does Romanian mean?
Romanian?
What
Romanian is
No, like Romani, that word.
Romani.
Romani.
Romani. They're a group of people that traveled from India to Europe a very, very long time ago. And they still live in Europe today, and some European countries are prejudiced against them.
Amaya, do you have your hand up?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Why do you think people get mad because you have to speak language?
Well, that's a very good question, actually. For a lot of people, the problem is that about 70 years ago, Russia came to Moldova, and they took it over. And a lot of people, when they think of Russian, they think of the people who came in and took over the country. And so they're offended that I speak the language of people that invaded them.
Does that make
That's why a lot of
sense?
people don't like it.
Does that make sense, guys? So think about, I'm trying to think
I'm trying to think when.
Yeah. Like, think about if we wrote a story about our class and some other teacher who you didn't like came in and took over our classroom and booted out Miss Lursman and myself. And they took over our classroom and they started to run things in a way that you didn't like. And then they brought in another group of people with them. Would you be as open to liking that group of people?
No way.
Probably not. So that's kind of what happened. The Russian people came in and took over the country. They booted out the leaders of Moldova and took over the country. And they brought a lot of other Russian people with them. And the Romanian people who lived there at the time were unhappy about that. They didn't like it. And so they don't like Russian people because they associate Russian people with that time in their history. Is that fair to the people who are Russian today that had nothing to do with it? Probably not. But that's why there is some prejudice against them.
Yeah, my family here speaks Russian.
India to what?
To Europe.
They speak Russian. They know how to speak Romanian, but they prefer to speak Russian because they speak it better. And they're Moldovans. They live here. They love this country. And it's not fair that some people don't think of them as Moldovans just because they don't speak Romanian.
Emma? Pearson?
Why isn't Moldova have its own language?
That's also a very good question, actually. Some people think that Moldova has its own language. They call it Moldovan or Moldavian. But this language is really just Romanian. And the reason they don't have their own language is because the language that they all learned came from Romania. A long time ago, a very long time ago, Moldova used to be part of the country called Romania. But now it's its own country. But all the people here still speak Romanian.
Parker?
What does the word Romanian mean?
What does the word Romanian mean?
Romanian is a language. It's actually very similar to Italian. And it's a language that comes from the country Romania.
And if you are from the country Romania, you are called a Romanian, just like if you're from the United States, from America, you're called what? An American, right?
American.
Okay. Does that make sense, Parker? Isabel? Do you have what?
Milk.
Milk?
I do have milk. It comes in bags here. It comes in a bag and you have to cut a little corner of the bag off and then you can pour it in your cereal.
Oh yeah, you have cereal. You don't have a strange
So-
country.
We have milk. A lot of people here have cows. There are a lot of farmers here, so we have milk.
Wow, lots of hands went up when you said that. Jacob? Want me to come back to you?
Wait, do you guys like have iPods or laptops? iPods or iPads or stuff like that?
Yeah, actually here in Moldova, technology is very common. Moldovans are very good with computers. A lot of my students know more about my computer than I do. And yes, a lot of people here have computers. A lot of people here have the internet. Some of my students even have iPhones.
So, Adam, you've talked about, though, that there's a high percentage of poor people.
Yeah,
But
there is.
do they still have the technology?
The poorer people tend not to have the technology. Most people here have cell phones. But, you know, if someone's poorer, they tend not to have a very nice cell phone. They have a very old cell phone like I do. But a lot of people here have computers, probably about 50%. 50% of families have computers. My family has a computer.
How much percent of
And a lot of people have computers and cell phones. They're very common, and a lot of people even have nice cell phones, like iPhones.
Okay, Jacob, now do you want to ask the other part of your question?
yeah?
Go ahead.
How much people have iPods? Like how much percent?
So, could you hear him?
iPod,
Yeah, iPods.
Yeah, I'm at phones.
iPods or iPhones, maybe about 5%.
So not very many. If
Not
there
very
were
many.
100 people, that would be 5 who would have an iPod or an iPhone.
Most people don't have them. They're very, very expensive. Some of my students aren't very
Phones.
they're pretty well off.
He's talking about
Their
phones,
parents
Jacob.
work hard and do well, and so they can buy things like iPhones.
Dale?
But most people can't.
Where is the word Moldova?
The word Moldova, I don't know for sure, but I read a legend about a king who had a dog called Moldau, I believe. He had a dog called Moldau, and it was his favorite hunting dog. And this hunting dog was chasing some animals for the king, and it went into a river and drowned. And so the king named the land around the river Moldova for his dog. But I don't know if this is true.
Oh, do you heard that story? Feel good?
Amaya?
What's your favorite food, Moldova?
My favorite food in Moldova is called shashlik. It's called shashlik in Russian. In Romanian, it's called figuror. I don't know. It's little bits of meat, well, about that big, that they put on long knives that almost look like swords, and they put the swords over the fire and